Well, thank you so much. We're super nervous to be here. People came. But we also really want to share this story. So just by way of introduction, we are Flippfly, which is kind of a name we made up based on our last name. I'm Forrest. This is Aaron. We're a two-person development team, which means we do all kinds of stuff. So titles are pretty much meaningless. But what you really need to know is that we're nobodies from nowhere. We're from the middle of Wisconsin. Yeah, Wisconsin, represent there. Cheese. Aaron has some industry experience in AAA, and I'm kind of like a freelance graphic designer type person. So the question is, how did we end up on stage at GDC giving a talk, really? You know, why are we here? And that's really what we want to share. So the story starts with Race the Sun. And Race the Sun starts with this picture right here, which was a Google SketchUp image that Aaron just threw together, and he was like, he came to me one day, and he's like, wouldn't it be awesome just to fly through that, just endlessly, as fast as you could? And it sounded like a great idea, so we prototyped it. He put together a prototype that looked something like this, and it actually was fun to fly really fast through an endless terrain like that. It was fun almost immediately. We knew that it had to be all about speed. It had to be fast. It had to be, you know what I'm talking about. Exhilarating, adrenaline. It had to also be easy. We wanted people to just jump in and have that sense of flight. So the concept developed. We realized that solar power was an interesting way to present this because the sun could be your source of power, and if the sun set, you would die. And if you flew into shadows, your ship would lose power, and the sun would set even faster. And of course, if you crash into things, you die. So it's this dangerous but beautiful world. And we knew we had something fun. We knew we wanted to make this game, and we came up with a pretty little plan, and this was all going to work out great. We were going to make a demo in 1 to 2 months. We were going to put it up on Kongregate, get feedback. We were going to polish it up, put it on Steam, and profit. Boom, we were going to be indie game developers full-time. It's about the same time Steam Greenlight was announced, and we were like, oh, perfect. We don't have contacts at Steam. We will put together a Steam Greenlight page, put the game up there, and rock it to the top. You know, it's going to be great. And this was a wake-up, probably our first big wake-up call. The Greenlight comments started piling up, and yeah, we were just like, oh man, why is everybody on Steam a jerk? You know, and pretty soon, though, we realized there was actually some useful information here. This last one, gradient tool, the game. I don't even know what it means, but I had to put it in there. We realized, you know, there's some truth here. There's some reality here. Like, we put this game up really early, and it wasn't finished, and they're all kind of calling out the visuals, and they're ugly, and they kind of are. And so we went back and forth. Aaron had some great ideas for revamping things, and we ended up with a pretty big improvement on the concept. From there, we went to Kongregate. We published on Kongregate, and that went really well. We were featured by Kongregate. We garnered a pretty high rating right off the bat, and we ended up getting featured in their video kiosks in GameStop stores, and we had really solid session lengths coming through. So we were like, this is great. You know, this game is going to go. At that time, you know, we were still learning things, and we were like, we need development money, and this is the perfect time to launch. You know, do you want to buy an alpha? Sorry, I have a 3-year-old daughter, so Disney songs are always running through my head. So we put a little pop-up in the game. You know, you can buy into this alpha. You'll get early builds. Come over to our website, and we sold a few copies, but it was just nothing close to what we would need to actually fund development of the game. So it was a total flop. And then from there, we kind of got distracted. You know, we're like, we need to raise the volume of this game. You know, we need to get it in the public eye. So instead of focusing on game development, we started focusing on these clever ideas to sort of raise the volume of our company and our game. And we came up with this concept where our people who purchased the game would get votes, and they could vote on the game features, and we'd put those features in the game, and it was going to be really cool. And we did a bunch of web development, which we weren't familiar with. We made the web page and sent out a bunch of emails to announce it. And the very next day after we released this, Humble and Double Fine announced the Amnesia Fortnite bundle, which was basically the same idea, just more refined, more thought out, better presented, and we were just totally outclassed. Everybody ignored our emails, nobody cared. So from there, we're like, okay, well, teaser trailer, you know, that's where cool games start. You got to start with a teaser trailer. So we spent a long time putting together a teaser trailer, kind of came up with this backstory and the style for the game, and all the footage was still from this kind of early alpha version of the game that we were putting in there. It took tons of time. We sent all these emails out. We got one little mention in Rock, Paper, Shotgun about the game, and just a couple thousand views on the video. Basically another big fail. So here we were. We had blown a lot of time, and we were 8 months into the game development, running out of money. And we had to take on contract work, which, you know, that works out. Not to be down on contract work, but it was kind of soul-sucking, and it wasn't great work. And we were thinking, nothing's working. This is just not going to come together. So last-ditch effort, we thought, you know, Kickstarter. There's the answer. We'll put it up on Kickstarter. We're going to ask a reasonable amount of money. It's going to be great. We spent more time putting together the Kickstarter campaign. We sent it out to all our friends to get info and get their feedback on it. We put together a big Kickstarter video, and a week in, we looked like this. Less than 10% funded at a week in is failure. You know, if you've ever followed any Kickstarters, this is not going to work. So our pretty little plan was looking more like this. We had a couple successes, but it just wasn't coming together. This was especially hard because we both have families. We were burning through our savings. We were trying to start a company here, but it's hard to say you have a company when money's going out and not coming back in. Some friends and family thought we were being irresponsible and kind of implied that, so things were getting tense with certain people. We talked about quitting. We said, you know, maybe we should just get regular jobs and do this in our free time. And then on top of that, we felt an obligation to deliver to these alpha purchasers who had bought the game with the understanding that we were going to finish, you know. We didn't want to be those developers who just left them with an ugly alpha. So everything we tried felt like failure. We were down, we were discouraged, we were ready to give up. And I'm going to hand it off to Aaron he'll give a little more clarity about what was actually going on through this process.
Hey all. Is that maybe a little bit loud? So yeah, as Forrest said, you know, we'd gone through this series of events, and it kind of felt like everything was failing, and that was just probably the low point of the project and the company at that point. But we want to talk about kind of what was going on that we didn't realize at the time, but we have a little bit more perspective on it now. And we'd like to introduce an analogy that we feel is appropriate for this game and maybe some other games as well. And so we feel that indie development and success is kind of analogous to a dartboard. And what's interesting about darts is that it's totally deterministic, but when you're starting out, it feels like complete luck. You know, if you don't know what you're doing, you throw a dart and you're lucky if you hit the board, and then you do it again, and maybe you hit it every 3 times or something like that. And as you practice and improve, your skill improves, but also just your sheer odds of hitting the bullseye improves, you know. And we feel that, you know, our first 8 months of development was really teaching us a lot, and we were improving our skills, but we were also just increasing our odds of success, even though it didn't feel like it. So our Kongregate launch, you know, it taught us a lot about timing with a game launch and just kind of how to do that. The negative Greenlight Comments taught us to see patterns of feedback and gave us a thicker skin and just, you know, the ability to see through that and look for patterns. The Flippfly vote system taught us that what really matters first is the game. Innovating on business models and stuff like that is cool, but if nobody cares about your game, then it's not the right thing to do. The press response, it reinforced that the game is the #1 priority. You know, when you send 300 emails and you get 1 or 2 responses, there's probably something in the game there, and that was kind of a wake-up call for us. And the teaser trailer that we put out that we spent a couple weeks on taught us about what I call now the imagination-reality gap, which some of you are probably familiar. It's when you have this idea envisioned in your head of what the game is, and that's what you're telling people the game is, And for us, that was an awesome procedural endless racer with a unique world every day with a leaderboard that resets every 24 hours. But what everybody sees in reality is just, this bland world that's kind of in development and unpolished. And so, we kind of became a little bit more aware of that through that process. And so, kind of in desperation after the first week of our Kickstarter, I took to Reddit and I just posted, my Kickstarter is struggling, why? And I was kind of thinking back to that Greenlight campaign that we had launched and all the negative but useful feedback that we got there. And I was hoping to see sort of a pattern of feedback that we would be able to apply to our game. Maybe not for the Kickstarter, but it might give us some guidance or feedback that would be useful going forward. And it really worked. We got some really consistent feedback about the game world looking drab. It looks boring and repetitive. We had this awesome concept for these world portals, and you'd fly into a portal and it would take you to a different looking world, but in reality, like the world that it would take you to looked the same as everything else. And so to the end user, it was just kind of like the same boring world, and that feature just didn't matter to them at all. On the other hand, the people that actually went and played the demo on Kongregate were having a lot of fun with it. And so we were just sort of stubborn with it. It's like, we know we have a good game here. We just need to get people into it and to play it. It was just our presentation that was lacking. And so we kind of had a heartfelt conversation about the game and the development and what had happened. And we realized that we had this kind of scheme for creating the world where Forrest was hand modeling these objects like these houses that you see here. And then the world generation code was just kind of scattering them throughout the world. So it wasn't so much a procedural world, it's just sort of like a randomly scattered world created out of these models that were more or less all just like rocks. And so we started thinking back to games like Star Fox, where it was like, they built a building out of a cube essentially, where we spent a day hand modeling these things, and we were just talking about like, what if a building was a cube and a tree was a sphere with a cylinder underneath it, and what if we built a system where we could actually create a world out of these simple shapes, and it would look consistent and maybe a little bit better than what we have, even though it's more simple and representational. Maybe it would read better. And so we sort of had this vision for essentially throwing out everything that we had created so far and starting from scratch. And we kind of argued about it a little bit and talked about it, and we realized that we really didn't have anything to lose. The game wasn't going to be funded if we continued on the path that we were. And so we decided to kind of go for broke and just push forward on this new idea, and we were going to do it during our Kickstarter. And so, we set to work on this. I got into the world editor code, and I added new systems where you could create an object that was a hierarchy of other objects, all made out of the simple primitives. And Forrest took everything that I did and started recreating the world. And it really started to come together pretty fast. We added a system where we could animate objects, like you see these moving ships that kind of fly across the screen and make the world a little bit more dynamic. And we just got really excited about it. The Kickstarter was still going along the same path it was, but we were just kind of like more giddy and excited about the game than we had been before. And at the same time, we weren't totally giving up on the Kickstarter. We knew that it was a long shot, but we were still going to keep trying. We were going to keep throwing darts, essentially. We found a guy on Twitter named Sam, who was a fan of our game and a good artist, and we asked him to make a poster for us. And so he made a poster for us, and that was kind of a cool thing. We just took a chance and took that opportunity, and it worked out. And so here we were in the middle of this Kickstarter, or 3/4 of the way through the Kickstarter. And it was failing, obviously, but we felt like we were onto something. And so Forrest put together a trailer. Unlike the teaser trailer that we had spent 2 weeks on, I think he made it in about a day. And it was probably like 10 times better than the other one I was so excited about when I first saw it. And we decided to try to make the press more aware of our game. And so we sent out one email instead of hundreds of them. And I sent it to Ben Kuchera, who then worked at the Penny Arcade Report. And he often covered Kickstarters and just interesting games like ours. And we thought maybe we had a chance there. And so instead of saying, here's a really cool game, you should come check it out, like we had done in most of our other emails, we thought about how to make it a little bit more of an interesting story, maybe something more personal. And so I titled the email something like, "How a failing Kickstarter was the best thing for our game," because that was the type of headline that I recognized on his website. And I guess that's one tip, is just, write headlines for the journalists. They appreciate it. So and that worked out. So he wrote about us, and we released that launch trailer, and then we started just kind of like doing everything we could to communicate to the world that, this game is going to be awesome, and we really are excited about it now more than ever, and, it's going to be unique. And so things kind of just got crazy from there. So this is the world creator that we had built during the Kickstarter. And Forrest was taking requests on Twitter. Somebody requested a laser cat, and he was just making these things and then posting videos of them, and then people were getting more excited about it and increasing their funding pledges and stuff like that. So that was really cool. It was probably the most stressful day, couple days of our lives. But long story short, it's the hockey stick graph of the Kickstarter. So I'd love to say, we lived happily ever after, but so our brilliant plan then was to finish the game in 2 months, which would have put us in May. And so, of course, it took us until August to actually wrap it up. And we still weren't on Steam. We were still stuck on Greenlight, which, was kind of a complication. We had risen above total obscurity, but we were still mostly, buried in obscurity when it came to games. So we decided to launch the game just from our website, and we used the Humble widget, and we embedded it on our website, and we hired a company called Evolve, and they did the PR for us while we wrapped up development and fixed bugs, and they ran an open beta or a private beta, and got us coverage on probably 200 or 300 websites and YouTube channels. And so we launched the game on our website, and naturally, after the coverage dies down and we're not on the front page of some store somewhere, just the sales naturally trail off. And so when the dust settled after a month of being available, I think we had made less than $10,000 in sales, which for a 2-person company, it was like that would be just enough to fund us for a month, but it wasn't going to continue at that rate. And so we've seen this before, and we weren't ready to give up. If we were stubborn enough to get our Kickstarter funded, we could turn around this game too. So we knew that getting on Steam would be a big deal for us, and that was kind of our next big goal. And so we took to our blog and we wrote a blog post about the game and just the kind of interesting story about how we launched this game, and we hired a PR company, and we got covered on all these sites, and the game had an 80% Metacritic, which is pretty good for a game of this size and caliber, and we were pretty happy with that, but people weren't buying it. And we were seeing this kind of attitude of consumers, on lots of sites that covered us saying, "Why can't I buy it on Steam? And I'll buy it when it's on Steam, or I'll buy it when it's in a bundle," or whatever, And so we thought that was a story worth telling, and we were right. We actually got more coverage for that story about our launch failing than we had about the game up to that point. And that kind of started the chain reaction. It's like, here's a great game, and it's failing, and these guys aren't going to be able to make games. Let's vote for this thing on Greenlight. And then a YouTuber named Dan Nerdcubed covered it, and that sort of just started a chain reaction on Greenlight. So I think we went from the number 100 spot up to the number 10 spot on Greenlight. And at that point, we knew that, getting on Steam was imminent. It was going to happen at some point. We had gotten up to the number 10 spot. And we knew that once that happened, we were running out of money again. We were actually past the point that, we should have been. And we were going to have to do Steam integration and leaderboards and all that stuff. And so we decided to take kind of a calculated risk and just kind of go sideways again. And we hosted a sale for us and other indie developers. And so we just invited like 40 other indie developers who weren't on Steam. And we made a sale called the Not on Steam sale. And it wasn't really an anti-Steam thing. It was more of a message to consumers saying, if you're not buying games unless they're on Steam, then you're missing out because here's some great stuff that's only available, from direct sales or whatever. And so that was actually covered more than our game had been up to that point, which was kind of crazy, but pretty cool. And then I think an hour into that sale, we got an email from Valve saying, "Congratulations, your game has been greenlit." So that was pretty emotional. That had been over a year stuck on this system, and now we knew, okay, we actually have a shot at financial success here. And so we launched the game on December 9th, 2013, and it's been pretty successful for us. We'll talk about that more in a bit. And we'd just like to say that, Race the Sun isn't a mega hit. We've never won an IGF award. We entered twice. We've actually not even been nominated for an IGF or any other awards, but we are pretty proud of this particular award or statistic. So overwhelmingly positive. I think it means 95% of people on Steam are happy that they bought the game and they like it. So. Thanks. So at this point, I think I'll hand it back to Forrest, and he'll talk about kind of a summary of our hits and misses during this process.
So yeah, we had lots of hits and misses. There are lots of things we don't have time to talk about here, and we won't even cover here. But I just wanted to give you kind of a picture, that pretty development picture that we had at the beginning. This is a better illustration of what it actually looked like. We tried open development from the first 2 weeks of production, and it didn't work out at all. Our Greenlight campaign launch was kind of ill-advised and not well prepared, and it didn't work. We had a good hit when we responded to those negative Greenlight comments, and we adapted, and the game became better as a result. The Kongregate launch went really well. We are still remain bad at scheduling and financial planning. Business model innovation didn't matter because we didn't have much of a game at that point. Spending a bunch of time on a teaser trailer for an unfinished game also didn't work. Sending out dozens or hundreds, I don't know how many press emails we sent out for an unpolished game was a big miss. Describing the game as an endless runner was a bad idea. A procedural world that didn't look interesting was a miss. Reinventing the game during a Kickstarter actually turned out to be a pretty big thing. That actually was a major point for the game. Commissioning art from an experienced artist, we did pay him. We didn't just ask him. He got money. But he was enthusiastic about the game, and he was already into it by the time we commissioned him. And that was a great idea. PAX 2013, we met a lot of important people that have influenced what's happened to the game since then. We did some more bad project planning, and the game extended on further than it should have. Launching on our own website without the support of a major store didn't work out. Telling the story of our failure worked out great. Launching our own not on Steam sale was somewhat of a shot in the dark, but it worked really well. That was a big hit. We had hundreds of thousands of hits on our website. We were retweeted by, or tweeted about the sale that people like Notch actually crashed our website when he did that. The Steam launch went really well. We were pretty well prepared. We did a workshop integration on Steam. That was a big hit. The Steam Daily Deal, participating in that was our first big sale, and it was great. Participating in a Humble Bundle was a big plus. At PAX 2014, we got a booth, and we met a lot more people that are still influencing the future of this game. And PlayStation launch was also a big hit. So we tend to show more hits than misses. I'm not sure if that's accurate. There may be more misses than hits. But the question is, what does success look like? For us, we call this a success. And I think it's probably a lot more common story of success than you commonly get in sort of the post-mortem talk. But here's what it looks like for us. We've surpassed $400,000 in gross revenue on PC. We've had a successful PlayStation launch on 3 of their platforms. And this year, I don't think we've announced this anywhere, but we'll be coming to Xbox One, Wii U, and iOS. All those ports are in progress this year. So, And really, most importantly, we funded our next game. So we're partway through development on the next game. So just, our coach kind of asked us, if you could go back and talk to yourselves at the beginning of this, what would you tell yourself? How would you warn yourself? And this is a great question. So I'm just going to wrap up with this and, maybe write these down if you're a first-time indie developer. First off, this never happens. The easy road to success, We were reading a lot of postmortems at the time, that gave, they tried to give like this formula for success, just do this and this and this. And what we really needed to know was we just needed to throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall and see what stuck. That's totally normal, Don't despair. You're going to have misses. Make every throw count. If you have a miss, learn from that. Figure out what you did right. If you have a hit, if you have a success, don't just chalk it up to luck. Figure out what you did right. Figure out what you did wrong. Stubbornness won't guarantee success, but assume it's necessary for your game. And most of all, if I could just leave you with this, don't stop throwing darts. So, thanks so much. And just a huge thanks to GDC and our advisor for helping us out with this.
Yeah.
And we're just so happy to be here. So we'll be over in the wrap-up room if anybody wants to chat further. So.
Thanks.